Okay, so we'll just let it go.
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started. And then we'll get a few more people here, and a few of our members are in some other committees, including Vice Chair. Okay, we're gonna start today with Senate Bill 165 and Senator Hedelman. Well, first of all, who do we got up here? We've got Marcus Alston, who I have met, Amy Ocasio, and Leanne Pissarro, and we've got Gwendolyn Shem. Am I missing something? Those are the four you designated as sponsor panelists.
Right. We are missing Leanne Pissarro, but she is on her way over here. So with the chairman's indulgence, if she comes in while we're testifying, if she could just come up to the panel, that would be great.
Perfect. And then first of all, let me just say that this is a big week for Senator Hedelman. Not only did she become a grandma this week for the first time, but we'll give her a round of applause. But not as important, she is the first witness on the first bill of the session in EEE. So this is it. So it's a historic week for Shelley Hedelman, Senator Hedelman. Okay, with that said, Senator, you've got all the time you need to present Senate Bill 165, and then each of the other witnesses are going to be subject to the 2-minute rule. And so we'll just take it from there. So Senator Hedelman, it's all yours. Senate Bill 165.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am honored and humbled to be to have the first bill hearing before EEE for 2024. So thank you for having us today. I am here before you to present Senate Bill 165. This is a bill that focuses on an issue that this committee and the legislature has spent a lot of time on, and that is the mental health of young people. This bill, the aim of it is to ensure that the coaches who are working with student athletes, both in public school settings and in higher educational settings, have the training that they need to be able to identify mental health issues and to be able to direct the students who are coming to them to the appropriate resources in those institutions. So for a number of years, I have focused on and passed 2 bills with this committee's help that really focused on the physical well-being of student athletes. Back in 2019, as a result of the tragic death of Jordan McNair, I worked with Jordan's parents, and we passed some protections to ensure that people who worked with young student athletes address some of the physical needs that they had. Similarly, in a couple of years later, we passed the Elijah Gorham Act, and that made sure that educational institutions had the resources like defibrillators and cooling and the technological pieces to focus on the physical well-being of athletes. I see this as a sort of a natural next step, and making sure that our professionals who are working with student athletes, both in the K-12 public school settings and in our public school higher educational settings, have the wherewithal to be able to help students who come to them or help identify mental health struggles that some of their athletes might be dealing with. We all know, I have 2 kids who are now young adults who both played sports in and outside of school. Just to be clear, we're talking about school settings, this bill. And coaches have different kinds of relationships with students than teachers do and other professionals in school settings. And there are many times where kids are out on a field or in a locker room, and the coaches are hearing things, and they might be more approachable than, say, their English teacher or their math teacher. And so it's a different kind of relationship, a different kind of setting. Not all coaches are teachers. So sometimes they're coming in from outside of our educational system. But this bill really focuses on getting MSDE and getting MHEC to work with the professionals who are seeing our kids in these more informal settings, and to help them. And we will tell you, there's some research here that shows that coaches themselves are struggling with not having the tools they need to be able to help identify mental illness, and also just other mental health issues that their student athletes are dealing with. So I'm going to turn it over. One last thing. There is really no fiscal note associated with this. The DLS believes that the institutions they're already doing training with coaches on physical things. So we believe that they can also do training on the mental health tools that they need as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcus Alston, and Marcus is well, he'll tell you who he is, but he came to us, not just me, but other people in the legislature about this issue because it's so personal to him. So thank you.
Okay, Marcus, and each of you, for the record, since we're streaming, tell us your names so everybody will know. Marcus.
Senator Feldman, members of the Education, Energy, Environment Committee. My name is Marcus Alston. I'm the founder and executive director of Alston for Athletes. As a former Division I student athlete with lived mental health experience, I'm in support of Senate Bill 165. Coaches serve as a first responder to a student athlete. They go through CPR training, but they go through no formal mental health training. CPR training is used in a life or death situation for a student athlete, but a mental health crisis can be a life or death situation for a student athlete as well. So how come coaches are not properly equipped to help a student athlete in crisis? In my 15 years of playing football, I don't recall a coach having to use CPR once when I couldn't count on two hands the amount of times I've seen teammates in some sort of emotional distress. As student athletes, we often confide in our coaches about the personal things we're dealing with, but only 18% of coaches are confident they can support their student athletes' mental health, and 67% of youth coaches want to receive more training in this area. If I had a coach who was mental health certified, I could have potentially found out about my mental illness at a much earlier age, as opposed to finding out about it after I graduated college. COVID-19 can lead to PTSD symptomology, which will have lasting effects on the future generation of young student athletes. There were approximately 20 youth deaths related to COVID-19 the past 3 years, while there were approximately 160 youth suicides. Now think about all the health precautions that were put in place for the youth during COVID-19 versus what is being done for youth suicide. There are several organizations that have opposed SB 165, mostly due to the unfunded mandate, but there are several free training resources available. For example, the Student Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Training from the National Federation of High Schools. If coaches can find the extra time to watch film or binge watch their favorite Netflix show, then they have the extra time to complete a 2 to 3 hour training every few years. There's a much needed change in mental health and athletics, and I believe Senate Bill 165 is a step in the right direction. Attached in my testimony are letters of support from 7 sports psychologists and 8 advocacy groups, including NAMI Maryland. For reasons expressed, I respectively request a favorable report on Senate Bill 165. Thank you.
Okay, why don't you pass that mic down to your right.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Amy Ocasio. I am here today in multiple capacities, which include having a doctorate in prevention science with a focus on suicide prevention, a licensed clinical professional counselor, as the co-founder and president of the Live for Thomas Foundation, which is a suicide awareness and prevention nonprofit organization. And the most important, I am a mother who lost her 16-year-old son, Thomas, to suicide in July 2019. Thomas was a popular kid, athlete, honor student, and had been approved to graduate early to pursue his dream of enlisting in the U.S. Army. Thomas loved to hunt, fish, eat crabs, and spend time with family and friends. People would describe Thomas as having a contagious smile. Following his death, many people said, "I never thought it would be him." That's the thing with suicide. It doesn't discriminate. Anyone can be at risk. Yes, even those who appear to have it all. One of the primary focuses of the Live for Thomas Foundation is to promote mental health awareness among local high school athletes and coaching staff. This is accomplished through mental health awareness talks, which are facilitated by guest speakers with lived experience, clinicians to teach coping skills, representatives from local mental health agencies, and opportunities for the student athletes to ask questions. What we have found is that the students athletes want to talk. Therefore, coaches need to be prepared. These talks led me to the topic of my dissertation, Male Coaches' Perceptions of Their Role and Capacity in Supporting Male Student Athletes' Mental Health. Findings included coaches perceive they have a role in supporting their student athletes' mental health, and they're willing to take on that role. Coaches' comfort levels varied in regards to providing support and knowledge pertaining to mental health. Coaches want a list of mental health disorders and their signs and symptoms, including wanting to know the top 5 mental health struggles for student athletes. Coaches want an understanding of normal adolescent behaviors versus indicators of a mental health struggle. And coaches want the knowledge and skills on how to respond in specific situations. And this includes grounding techniques and emotion regulation to help them remain calm when freaking out internally when presented with the student experiencing a mental health struggle. The bottom line is student athletes are wanting to talk and coaches are wanting to be prepared. Therefore, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 165. I will leave you with this. Think about your son, your daughter, your grandchildren, your niece, your nephew. If they were experiencing a struggle with their mental health, who would you want as their coach? One with mental health training or one without? The choice is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, tell us who you are.
My name is Gwendolyn Shem. I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I graduated from undergrad with a 4.0 as a double major. I started for 4 years as a center midfielder on the soccer team and was the first academic All-American and NCAA Sportswoman of the Year nominee in the school's Division II history. Those are things that define me, but so do these. She has anxiety, she is depressed, and has panic attacks and nightmares. Like I said, my name is Gwendolyn Shem, and I'm a former Division II collegiate athlete. Thank you for listening to my testimony today. On paper, everything appeared fine. As a matter of fact, it appeared more than fine. I excelled in nearly everything I did, and sure, there were challenges, but I overcame them. On paper, I was told I looked extraordinary, but when that paper flipped, there was a side of me I wanted no one to see. The statistics surrounding student-athlete mental health are staggering to the point where the NCAA has declared mental health as a health and safety concern facing athletes. It scares me to think that I was nearly just another number. Coaches know what to do when an athlete's body turns against them, but what about their mind? They're trained in CPR and concussion protocol, but what about being educated on the signs and symptoms of mental illness? Right now, there are grassroots movements across high schools and college campuses starting this conversation about student-athlete mental health. But honestly, it shouldn't just be up to the student athletes. By supporting Senate Bill 165, you can help student athletes catalyze this culture shift in athletics alongside their coaches. You can help coaches learn these warning signs. Let's do this together before it's too late. Thank you for your time and consideration for this piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go back. Your fourth sponsor panelist has
Thank you.
arrived.
Thank you so much. And my apologies coming from public school. It was busy today. Good afternoon. My name is Leanne Pissarro, and I'm here to testify in support of coaches' mental health training legislation. I'm a former NCAA athlete, and I'm now an Annapolis resident, a high school English teacher, and a varsity sports coach. I'm also one of the founders of The Hidden Opponent, a national nonprofit that takes action for student athlete mental health and works to create an overall healthier sports culture. As a high schooler, I played at some of the highest levels of elite soccer for many different coaches and many different coaching styles. I went on to play college soccer in Virginia, where I faced harrowing coaching abuse disguised as old school coaching tactics. This ruined my mental health, my self-worth, and my love for the game. I've since found healing in my own career working with young people as a coach and an educator. I'm inspired daily by our young people's ability to name their feelings and their struggles. They're capable of using language to describe when times are tough, and they're also capable of asking for help when it's needed. It's us adults that are a little bit behind the curve of the mental health movement. The Hidden Opponent works in all 50 states with hundreds of student athletes serving as ambassadors of our mission. Gwen is one of them. Our nonprofit is now officially partnered with Adidas, one of the largest sporting companies in the world. We're seeing more and more top-level athletes speak out about mental health and focus on holistic wellness. Sports culture is just beginning to take these steps, and Maryland can be a front runner in this marathon. Requiring mental health training should be as logical as requiring CPR certs. In my 25 years, I've spent countless hours on sports fields, and I'm grateful to say that I've never witnessed a cardiac episode. But exactly 10 years ago today, on January 17th, 2014, my mom came into my bedroom to wake me up and tell me that my former teammate, Madison Holleran, had died by suicide. She was 19 and I was 15. At the time, I didn't even understand what the word suicide meant. Now I'm all too familiar with the concept. In the last decade, I've lost even more classmates to mental health crises. My biggest wish as a coach is to keep my players safe. Imagine this, you're at your child's sports game. Two players collide hard, bodies are sprawled on the ground. Your child's coach is off the bench, absolutely screaming at the referee in honor of keeping the players safe. If you've been around contact sports, you've seen this play out. Coaches are so quick to point fingers at referees for ensuring player safety. And trust me, I have absolutely seen some pretty terrible referees in my time. But the baseline safety starts with us as coaches. We can't control what happens on the field, neither can you as a parent or a fan. But coaches can control the type of environment that we create on our teams. Care should be at the core of coaching. Mandated mental health trainings will reinforce these ideals and help save lives. I'm proud to now call Maryland home, and I'll be even more proud when we sign this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Senator Hedelman and the entire panel. We're going to go to Senator Augustine, who's, been a real leader on behavioral health issues, but
Thank you.
Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, and thank you, Senator Hedelman, for bringing this forward. I very much support mental health first aid. I think it's a great tool for folks. My question, though, for you in this case is, you're singling out the coaches. What about the other folks who do extracurricular activities, a band leader, someone who does the robotics club? I mean, I love team sports, but how do you sort of put those things together?
So it's a great question. If we had the resources, I would say let's do them all. We just decided to focus on athletics. So many kids participate in lots of extracurriculars after school. And I would say I would be supportive of having all of those people go through the training. This is just one place to start.
Okay, that's a challenge for me, is that they are important kids. All of our kids are important.
Absolutely.
And so that's just on my mind. I'm just letting you know that's on my mind. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Brooks, and then we'll go to Senator Lewis Young after that.
Okay, this is to Marcus. Being a football player, there's this certain level of macho that goes along with the sport. And then, if you get injured or something going wrong, you just tough it out. You're proving to them that you're a man, How do you get beyond that? Because, it seems like that is part and parcel to the game, being tough and, setting an example for the other guys, and then they want to be like you. And how do you get beyond that?
I'll just say that just football just has taught me some amazing resilience skills. Being able to push kind of my body to its limits. I don't know. I just feel like all those experiences that happened, I went through 4 surgeries in a 3-year period, and it was very, difficult. In my senior year of college, I retore my labrum. And I had tendonitis in my knee. So I was playing at about 60 or 70% that season. But, all those things were unfortunate, but I believe all those things led to my purpose, which is advocating for student athlete mental health.
All right, good. Thanks, Chair. Thank
Okay,
you.
Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to expand upon a comment that someone made, that we understand how to treat physical health in sports, but not mental health. I'd like to explore the relationship that hit very close to home for me. I have a daughter who was an outstanding swimmer, had to have surgery 2 consecutive years in a row, lost momentum, lost her identity. Her identity was a champion swimmer. And when she lost that at the age of 15, 16, we struggled with something far beyond a physical health limitation. So anyone on this panel that either has some data or knowledge of the intersection or the relationship of the two, I'd be very interested in understanding how large a phenomenon that is.
I'd be happy to speak a little bit to both of your questions. I work in a school and I work with students and athletes in all sorts of realms, creative writing, the English classroom, the sports field. I think why we're starting with this athlete mental health bill and why I'm so passionate is because it is so inherently tied to that identity. I see kids that love robotics, that participate in the school theater, but that is not central to their whole being. Whereas the athlete identity is so strong. And I think it starts with the competitive nature of athletics versus robotics or arts might be something that you do more holistically to develop yourself. Athletics are cutthroat in this area too. I grew up in a cutthroat state for athletics too. It's everywhere, but I mean, Maryland's lacrosse, for example, you have 5-year-olds having a schedule that is mimicking the high school schedule for their lacrosse practices, right? And there is data correlating, that mental health is positively impacted by athletics, that especially young girls that participate in sports have positive correlations of confidence, self-awareness, stuff like that. But there's also the danger of what happens when that goes wrong, right? What happens when there's an injury, when there's a coaching change, when you get cut from the team. And our students don't necessarily have those skills always to overcome those. And I think, to your point, so much of it goes back to that identity. So to speak a little bit to both of your points, I think the athlete identity is so strong, it actually causes a lot of these issues far more than helps it when it's not in a healthy balance. So thank you for asking.
Well, I guess maybe just to pick up on that a little bit, because I'm trying to put Senator Augustine's point. Is there, back on the data in this, is there a correlation? I'm thinking of you, Marcus. Between having as a football player, a knee injury or that itself, that there's a correlation that we could point to say, that once there's a physical injury, that your risk of having some issues behavioral health wise. I'm trying to come up with a response to Senator Augustine about why this might be somewhat different than band or whatever. I don't know the answer. I'm just putting that out there just as, kind of something to be able to articulate that makes some sense. So any other questions of any of the panelists? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony. We do have a few additional witnesses signed up favorable. Ann Geddes from the Mental Health Association of Maryland. Is she here today? There you go. Okay, so you guys you're released. You can listen to the rest of the testimony. And then we've also got favorable Christine Crone from MDAAP, which is okay. So we've got both Christine and Ann. So why don't you, Ann, why don't you start and tell us your full name, and then
Sure.
we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Ann Geddes. I'm the Director of Child and Older Adult Policy at Mental Health Association of Maryland. Mental Health Association is a nonprofit mental health consumer education and advocacy organization. And I thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 165 today. Guys, I know you've heard playing sports can have many positive mental health benefits, but pressure to perform and sports injuries can have a profound negative impact on an athlete's mental well-being. A Canadian study found that 68% of the surveyed athletes met the criteria for major depressive episodes. Results from another study showed that female athletes in particular are at risk for depression. And it is known that sports injuries can lead to both depression and substance misuse. Studies have shown that coaches can have a significant impact on both promoting the mental health of students and engaging them in help seeking when they show signs of mental health distress. Coaches have a unique relationship with students who may trust their guidance above that of other adults. Yet while coaches can play an important role in supporting the mental health, many are unsure what to do. Mental health education is needed to assist coaches in supporting the mental health of athletes. The data that demonstrates the prevalence of mental health needs among athletes and studies that show the important role that coaches can play in mental health promotion and intervention strongly support the need to increase the availability of mental health training for coaches. For this reason, MHAMD supports Senate Bill 165 and asks for a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the other witness, then we'll take questions. Tell us who you are.
Good afternoon, members of the committee and Chair Feldman. I'm Christine Crone here on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which represents 1,100 pediatricians across the state. We are here in support of Senate Bill 165, Education Coaches Mental Health Training. As pediatricians, we are well positioned to do mental health screenings at pre-participation sports physicals, but it's really the coaches are the ones who see the students on a day-to-day basis and are an excellent tool for early detection and warning signs of mental and behavioral health issues. And for that reason, we support this bill.
Okay, thank you to you both. Any questions for the panel? Senator Augustine.
Yeah. Thanks, you all. I'm really grateful for working with you all on these issues all the time. Thank you. I know you support this. Would you also support others who work in extracurriculars for students, or share with me the differences, like why maybe we wouldn't include other folks who work with students in extracurriculars?
I don't think we're not opposed to
I
other
know.
activities. I think the prevalence of burnout and stress is higher in youth athletics as compared to band or chess or other extracurricular activities. That would be.
Y'all must not have met folks who do theater in a serious way.
Oh.
Or competitive cheer in a serious way. I mean, there's a lot of burnout in these things that are not mainstream sports, just because I have to know a little bit about that. So I'm just asking about, so it's just a continuation. So you all obviously consider though that the coaches have a unique, the student athletes are uniquely at risk is where you all are coming from.
Yeah, there's research that shows that they're uniquely at risk,
Okay.
and then the sports injuries issues and the potential risk of substance misuse also play into that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, we did have one witness signed up unfavorable, Mr. McAvoy, but he is not in the queue. So that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 165. Next up, we have a bill with one witness, and we're going to go to Senator Salling for a quick one. Then we're going to go to Senator Ellis after that. Senator Salling on Senate Bill 112. I think I saw Senator Johnny Ray Salling walk in here.
Yes, sir.
There you are. Oh, okay. Okay, well, you are the only witness and you have signed up favorable for your bill. And you get the time you need to make a powerful case for Senate Bill 112.
Well, I hope I did. My staff put it in there, so I hope they did do me favorable. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and Committee. For the record, I'm Senator John Ray Salling, and I thank you for the great opportunity to present Senate Bill 112. It's student cellular use policy required. I want you to realize this is a policy. This is not taking the phones away from the students or from anybody. This is a policy that I believe should be in place. Why? It requires all the boards of education in Maryland, Baltimore City to establish a policy regarding students' use cell phones. I would like to make it abundantly clear that this bill does not force a school system to prohibit student cell phones use. The purpose of this bill is to have all state board of education to enact a policy requiring cell phone use. In particular, a county would like students to use their cell phones at any time if they want that. If they want to have that, they can have that. I'm not going to take that away, and that's not why I'm here. This bill would not hinder them for that right. But having a cell phone policy provides clear guidelines on how students use their phones within the school premises using a shared understanding and a minimum confusion. A well-defined policy helps in minimum distractions in classes, exams, and other education activities. Establishing rules against inappropriate use of cell phones can contribute to prevent cyberbullying, harassment among students and other places in school. Implementing a policy can help in maintaining the security of students and staff by regulating the use of cell phones, especially in sensitive areas of the school. It encouraged responsible use of technology by guarding students on when and where it is appropriate to use their cell phones, promoting a healthy relationship with a digital device. A policy can outline measures to address private concerns related to the use of cameras on phones within the school premises, safeguarding the rights and privacy of individuals. While not prohibiting cell phones, a policy can define appropriate times and methods for communication, ensuring that important announcements can be made throughout the channels of all the schools and the parents. By setting guidelines on cell phones, it can be used for educational purposes. The policy supports the integrity of technology into the learning process, aligning with method educational goals. Having a policy streamlines the enforcement of rules, making it easier for teachers, administrators to address violations, considering and being fair. The existence of a cell phone policy reflects everything in community involving parents and education and students, and shaping the guidelines for the best suit and the local education environment. Now, I just want to say this. It's for the best use of kids to make sure if they are doing a test or having a type of test or any type of activity that the teacher is explaining, that they don't have their phone and using it on Facebook, using it as something that they would do on YouTube and not learning and not listening. I think it's a problem. And so all I'm saying is they should have a policy. And again, it's not taking away their phones or not telling them they can't have a phone. And I just want you to know, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair, I understand there's a couple of people that are against this. But what I don't understand is that they haven't came to me and asked me why they're against it. And I have an open door. At any given time, if anybody's against something, I just think they should have a conversation with the senator and give them an understanding of why they're against it. And maybe we can come to a middle of the road place and work well with this. Because you have bills and at times people don't get to you and tell you why they're against it. I think you should have an opportunity to defend your bill. And I know people that are against it. But all I'm saying is this, and I emphasize, I'm not trying to take phones away from students. I want the teachers to teach, and I don't want the kids to be on Facebook or on YouTube while they're teaching. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I am open for any questions, and I thank you for this time.
Okay, we've got some questions. We're going to start with Senator Gallion, then Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Senator. So my question is, would this include the smartwatches or would it just be cell phones? Because I have my oldest daughter, we just started her with a watch so she could contact just limited people, just family members and stuff, and they can text on it. I can do limited stuff. So that's the question. Would it include the watches?
I think devices, if you can cover devices, because they use them as phones. So I think that could go right along with it. And if you want an amendment, I would be happy to have that as a part of that. But I think it'd be an important part of that. If it comes to that situation, I think they should be a part of that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, Senator Watson.
Thank you for this. For me, this is an easy bill, almost a no-brainer. You're not impeding on what's going on in the local jurisdictions, but we know that any distraction impedes progress within the schools. My only question is, do you know of any school districts who have kind of some type of rigorous policy? I know other countries do. They don't bring the phone into class, and it's very strict, which is why we're being outperformed in so many other countries. But here, in the US, do you know of any school districts that have such a policy in place where they've really had tight policy around this?
I know some private schools do not let their students have their phones during school.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have problems like I believe a lot of us are, I would say public schools have. And when the time's done, they get their phone back, and that's what their policy is. And I think it works for them. But I'm going to emphasize, I'm not here to say you can't have a phone, but I think they shouldn't have a phone and be on YouTube or on Facebook or anything else while they're being taught.
And so I just happen to be on a school board when kids having cell phones was a thing.
Yeah.
And as a school board, we fought against it. We felt that it would totally impede and disrupt classes, and it does.
It does.
However, at the time, the parents were very strongly opposed to that position because they wanted the ability to get in touch with their children. In the private schools that you mentioned, do they go back to the olden days where if a parent wanted to talk to their child, they contacted the office, the intercom contacted the child, they came down the hall and were able to talk to their parents? Is that how they do it?
That's what they do is before they're a part of that school, they let them know they can't have a phone.
That's
And
the
then
entry
exactly,
criteria.
and then by the time that, before they're done, I guess with the interview, they're told, if you want to get a hold of your student, this is our number at the office and we can get a hold of them. So that's how they do that.
Thank you. I'd love to co-sponsor this bill with you.
Thank you.
Senator Brooks and then Senator Lewis Young, and then looks like Senator Hester after that. Senator Brooks, you're up first.
All right, thanks, Chair. Delegate, I'm a senator. Oh, my God.
I got
Yeah,
promoted
quick,
last
quick,
week.
quick question. How does your bill, SB 112, differ from current law? Because I read many local jurisdictions, the LEAs have policies in place that governs the use of cell phones in the schools and the school grounds. So how would this bill differ from the current law?
To be very honest with you, Senator, I don't know the current law, but I know the problem that they've had in a lot of our schools. And I think this, if it had opportunity to be in law, I think it would help in every way. But I could look into that and follow up with you and see if there's something in place right now to do that. I would be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frequently, when we develop policy for our schools and our children in schools, we hear the objection from parents that should be a parental decision. So I'm just curious how you would respond if a parent said that should be my decision as to whether or not my child should have a phone with them in school.
And in all respect to that parent, I would let them know at that time, being in school, that they're being taught in basic education with math, science, and other curriculum that is part of that. And they will not have the opportunity to misuse anything, which would be a phone, to interfere with their teaching, that the teacher is being paid to teach those kids. I think the parent needs to have a better understanding and understand that the child is there for that period of time to be taught. So the teacher oversees that, not the parent. And I think if they can have that understanding, I think the parent would understand why we're doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll remember that.
Okay, Senator Hester, did you still? Okay, we're good. Any final questions for Senator Solomon? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 112.
Thank you, sir. At any time, please come to my office. I have coffee.
Okay. Senator Ellis, are we still waiting on a few witnesses on your bill? We can go to the next one. It's no.
Go to the next one.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
okay. Okay, we're gonna hold off on Senator Ellis's bill, and we're gonna go to, we've got a couple of department bills that have been put on in by me on behalf at the request of. So we're gonna start with Senate Bill 248, which departmental bill from the State Library Agency increases the maximum authorized number of public members from 1 to 2 on the governing board for each regional library resource center, Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, Western Maryland. In any event, I'm going to bring up the panel department. Tamar Sarnoff is okay. Ms. Sarnoff, why don't you come up? Irene Padilla and Ashley Teagle. And that is the extent of the witnesses. And so we have a panel here in support in favor of this departmental bill, Senate Bill 248. So you guys can decide amongst yourself who wants to go first.
Secretary.
Oh, Madam Secretary, former Secretary. Yes.
Hi.
Okay, why don't you lead off?
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Senators Feldman and Kagan. It's good to see you both. I'm Irene Padilla. I'm the Maryland State Librarian. And it's really my pleasure to be here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 248. This bill is an important step in our efforts to ensure the governing boards of Maryland's 3 regional resource centers, which, as you explained, are located in Southern Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, and in Western Maryland, and to ensure that they best reflect the communities they serve. The bill would expand representation on the regional resource center boards from 1 public member to 2. Having 2 members of the public, in addition to the 1 trustee from each county served, allows the resource centers greater flexibility in recruiting board members that are aligned with member library initiatives, such as development of equity, diversity, and inclusion plans and other important efforts. This expansion will allow our regional resource center boards to bring in community leaders, attorneys, financial experts, fundraisers, advocates, and other allies. This change will broaden and elevate the regional library as an entity mindful of a larger community issues like economic development, health, transportation, and public safety. These boards are self-appointing, and each has developed an application package that includes formal interview questions and a process to vet all potential members to ensure they understand the organization's needs and responsibilities. Board members have no influence on collection development, policies, or collections, as Maryland's regional resource centers do not circulate materials. Therefore, board members have no jurisdiction over the freedom to read in the counties they serve. In short, Senate Bill 248 will bring these regional libraries into compliance with community-based principled governance structures that employ best practices for a nonprofit entity. We hope for your approval of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who wants to go next? Here you go.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and committee members for your time today. My name is Ashley Teagle. I am the CEO of the Southern Maryland Regional Library Association, and I also support SB 0248, which will allow SMRLA to recruit 2 members of the public from Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's County to join our board. The proposed revision will expand the diversity of the regional resource center boards and allow for more equitable representation for the community served. Currently, SMRLA is recruiting an additional member for Calvert and St. Mary's counties, and these candidates who have submitted applications to date have varied work, educational, and volunteer experience, which will help us create a more well-rounded board. As our state librarian has stated, our board now has a recruitment package that will assist us with establishing our recruitment benchmarks and identifying board members with skills such as policy development, personnel management, business management, and strategic planning, just to name a few. Our board did approve an equity, diversity, and inclusion plan at our December 2023 meeting, and they acknowledged the lack of diversity on our board and desire to change this. One way for our board to be able to do that is to look outside of our public library partner boards for potential members. We serve the residents of Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's counties, and there are benefits to those partner libraries due to the change in our board composition. Our partner libraries will benefit from us having board members who represent the community served. Currently, my board lacks racial diversity. Secondly, the ability to recruit from members of the public will allow SMRLA greater flexibility in recruiting board members who can support our mission as well as our partner libraries. We would be able to recruit board members with specific talents that will help us further our organizational mission and goals. And finally, the board does become self-appointing. Currently, my public library partners are providing me with names of new board members. So while we would retain 1 member from each county that is a trustee, the majority of the board members would then be recruited from the public. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our final witness.
I cede my time.
Okay, we'd like to hear that. Okay, questions for the panel. We've got Senator Carrozza. And then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's nice to see you, and also the Eastern Shore tie. I know that you've moved on. I support this bill. The only question I had is I tend to be a literal person, so it doesn't actually say in the fiscal note, it mentions the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland and Western Maryland. But in the bill, it just says 2 members of the public from each area. So I didn't know if we could designate it just to make it clear what the areas were for the bill that could
think
be
that-
amended.
That makes sense, yes.
So
If you're, no, she says no.
Council Stacy Goodman is nodding her head in the negative on that one,
So
or shaking, I'm
this
saying,
bill
shaking
is-
her head.
Yeah, the bill is more general in nature. It's talking about all the regional resource centers. So it's not any specific one and it's not designation from that. I mean, your regional is confined to your region. So you're looking for individuals from that region as other regional resources centers are. So we're not particularly designating centers. We're just saying, hey, we're looking in these areas as confined by the jurisdiction of each of the boards. So in all honesty, I don't think that change is necessary. And they're doing what they need to do without having to make a change like that.
my question would be, how many regional areas are there, and couldn't we at least name the regional areas?
That bill, the way that it's set up for right there.
Why don't I have an idea, because she's not a designated witness, so we're gonna, how about we can take this pretty narrow issue, offline, and we'll figure it out. There's,
Okay.
an
And
answer.
I thank you for being open to that.
Okay, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I didn't get enough sleep last night, so Ms. Padilla is not a former cabinet secretary, but a couple of weeks ago, she did just announce her retirement after about 22 years as head of our library system and the Maryland State Librarian, which is awesome. And I have to say, this fabulous woman was part of a panel that I was lucky enough to moderate at the Maryland Association of Counties conference. And of all the workshops, all the panels I have ever gotten the privilege of moderating, it was among the most dynamic. Libraries are just the centerpiece of our communities, our education. It provides support and assistance for people with disabilities who are having mental challenge, who are unhoused. I mean, they do so much. They make technology available for people who otherwise wouldn't have it. And Irene Padilla has been among the leaders in Maryland. And I just want to say that her last day appears to be June 30th, and this bill proposes to go into effect on July 1st. So it seems like it's not a bad, might not, Mr. Chairman, be a nice, not a bad farewell present for you. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for all of your service.
She has another bill here on the calendar, so we can pick the gifts. Okay, additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 248. And why don't we take that other, since you're there, Ms. Padilla, at the witness stand. We've got Senate Bill 250, and you are the only witness actually signed up for this bill. Let me double check on that. I believe that is the case. This is Senate Bill 250, is Department bill from, again, the Public Library Agency. It prohibits from charging a minor, an individual under age 18, either an overdue fine for failure to return materials by the end of the loan period, or 2, a replacement fee for materials under 21 days after the date on which the library materials were due. There's some other provisions in here, but why don't I turn it to you as the lone witness to testify in favor of Senate Bill 250.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. Well, it's my pleasure to testify once again before you today in support of Senate Bill 250. The genesis of this bill dates back to 2021, when the General Assembly passed the Building Lifelong Library Learners Act, which is quite a mouthful. The goal of the legislation was to prevent public libraries from charging overdue fines to minors and regulate the charging of certain fees. The revision we are here to support more fully describes the purpose and intent of the legislation and clarifies confusing language in the statute. The bill clarifies the language and provides definitions for a minor, which is defined as an individual under the age of 18 library materials, replacement fee, overdue fine, and special collections. This commonality of definitions ensures that all public libraries understand and follow the same requirements. Library directors and library boards rely on the statute for guidance to ensure uniformity of language. That uniformity helps to ensure that all Maryland public libraries understand and follow the same requirements. The bill also provides the necessary documentation if library boards or local governments try to reinstate library fines for minors at a future date. This legislation is a necessary step to ensure all community members can continue to utilize our public libraries without minors being penalized for overdue fines and unnecessary fees. And I thank you for your time and consideration of this bill.
Okay, do we have any questions for our state librarian? Senator Simoner.
Hi, thank you. Full disclosure, I didn't support the first bill, but just trying to understand the language. It looks like the distinction is a fine versus a fee. So I think, because I was getting a little confused there. So the fine is basically, they didn't bring it back in time. The fee is a replacement cost.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
That's exactly it.
Okay, so it looks like what the bill's trying to do is say that if somebody brings back the book after the replacement fee was given, that the library is not going to refund them that fee.
It depends on the time frame. If they bring it back within a reasonable time frame, within a year even, we'll refund the fee. I don't have the bill right in front of me, so I'm sorry. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage.
Let's see, it says, if a minor's overdue library materials are returned after a replacement fee has been paid, the public library is not required to fund the replacement fee.
Generally, they do fund that. So yes, they're not required. But generally they do.
Okay, and what is the purpose of that? Or is it cost savings or? Because
of not replacing it, you mean?
right, because you're basically taking any incentive for them to bring the book back. Because say I did it, I paid the replacement fee. Now I still have it. It's 5 days after the 21-day time frame. I want to bring it back. And then they're going to say, sorry, we just passed a bill that says we don't have to give you your money back. Why would I want to bring it back?
No, that's a good point.
Maybe think about that and let me know.
Okay, as we ponder that, additional questions of witness on this bill, Senate Bill 250. Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 250. And Senator Ellis, are we ready to roll on Senate Bill 189? And I'm going to call your sponsor. You've got 3 witnesses signed up. We've got Jack Hollenbach, R.P. Kasharwani, and Chikamara Obi-Yoha. Hopefully I didn't muck up the name too badly. But in any event, Senator Ellis, you've got the time you need to present Senate Bill 189. And then we'll go to your panelists, all who are here on behalf of the Maryland Student Coalition. So Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Madam Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environmental Committee. I'm Senator Arthur Ellis, representing the 28th Legislative District, which is most of Charles County. I'm here to present Senate Bill 189, Public Schools, Inclusive and Diverse English Language Arts, Development of Content Standards and Implementation. This bill aimed to do in a planned way what TikTok is doing for our kids now. Seem like, TikTok is teaching our kids about the world and whatever comes over there from unplanned, unlearned people have the impact on our youth because our school systems are not teaching about diverse cultures and diverse peoples and religions. We have taken the backseat to social media. The students here, through their coalition, came to me a couple of years ago and say, this is a problem, Senator Ellis. Can you work with us to put in a bill to fix this problem? And they're back here now working hard, coming to Annapolis, find the parking garage is full and they have to drive around until I sent my staff member kindly went out to sit in the car and so they can come here and testify. So I appreciate your patience moving the testimony back so they can be here, and I appreciate them so much for being here. The bill calls for highlighting and promoting diversity, including economic diversity, equity, inclusion, tolerance, and belonging. It examines the impact that unconscious bias and economic disparities have at both an individual and societal level. It encourages safe, welcoming, and inclusive environments for all students, regardless of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, mental, physical disability, or religious beliefs. This bill will include diverse language arts education in the school system. When we say language arts, what are we talking about? Well, in high school, it could be a class on Shakespeare, could be a regular English class where students read different books. So include a diverse set of books and materials for these students to work through. And it's interesting that the bill drafters reached out to several school systems and say, how much would this cost to really develop the standards? So we will not be writing the standards here in Annapolis. The school systems will do it. And so Anne Arundel County came back and said, well, that costs around $5.5 million. But other school systems say, hey, we have to update our standards from time to time, so it'll be a minimal cost. It won't cost us much. Also said local curriculum materials already meet requirements of the new English language arts content standards adopted by SPE, and by December 2025, costs for a lot of school systems will be much less than this the high amount from Anne Arundel County. So if we average all the costs for all the counties, basically, it will be minimal. And with that, I just wanted our Senate and our Maryland General Assembly to take over from TikTok and allow the professionals to develop these standards on diversity in our educational system to teach our students about what the world is all about. So thank you, Chair and Madam Vice Chair and committee members, and I ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 189.
Why don't we take your witnesses who were going through crowded parking, so they made it here anyway. Do you have a sequence? Do you have an order that you have a preference? Okay, why don't you start? We'll just go down the aisle, and each of you has 2 minutes. Okay.
Dear members of the Energy, Education, and Environment Committee, my name is Chikamara Obioha, and I have the honor of being the director of the Maryland Student Coalition, a student-led advocacy group that pushes for proactive legislative efforts on the state and local level. Our group is made up of almost 100 students hailing from over a dozen counties and cities throughout the state of Maryland. All initiatives we push for tend to the greater purpose of advancing student welfare and providing accessible student educational opportunities. I want to start off by reflecting on my favorite author, Octavia E. Butler. Her descriptions of the Black female experience in America have opened my eyes to find literary resonance, which is defined as the quality of having an intensity of emotion or richness of expression that evokes or reinforces a sympathetic response. And this, for me, was found within fictional characters, an unencountered experience. It was 2 years ago when my friends and I were discussing our favorite books, I noticed a discrepancy. Why was it that I got to read novels by Black female authors in schools, yet my friends in neighboring counties had never? As a state that prides itself on diversity and inclusion, Maryland students are not universally afforded the proper education to teach us of the importance of diversity and inclusion. The Maryland public school system had built a train without tracks, a plan with no action on sustainability. Of course, reading Shakespeare is important, but why can't we read literature from the viewpoint of transgender women, Chinese immigrants, African Americans, Latinos and Latinas, and LGBTQ+ individuals that reflects our present and not only our past? As you consider this bill, I urge you to think of leaders of tomorrow, of students. We need to be exposed to diverse perspectives, to be authentic and responsive leaders that stems from the education we receive at schools, the stories we read in class. As we strive for a more diverse future, I cannot let this one step back stand our story. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you, sir, you're up next.
Dear members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee, my name is Jack Hollenbeck and I am a junior at Howard High School in Howard County. As a Howard County Leadership U program graduate, an active student, and a contributing member to my school, I can say with 100% confidence that this bill is necessary to shape students into the socially responsible leaders of tomorrow. My experience in school, though very fortunate to expose myself to a few POC authors, was certainly not enough. The value of reading books from authors of perspectives other than mine allows me to learn about the world outside of my community. This bill is more than essential. It's life-changing. Students who read novels from more diverse perspectives are able to sympathize, understand, and reason with people from backgrounds different to their own. This bill safeguards students' futures as being educationally rich ones, providing students with an education that not only makes them college and career ready, but also life ready. As we live in an ever-changing world, our youth have to become equipped with how to face challenges, something past generations learned through books or stories told on how others who shared similar experiences to them overcame challenges. But today, our challenges are much different. The new generations are different. We are inherently educated differently with our expansive access to technology, inherently socialized differently due to rapid expanding access we have to social media and changing societal norms, and are inherently different. We need education that reflects these differences. Reading classics is not enough to teach us about our outside world because it no longer reflects our outside world. And of course, this bill is not advocating for classics to be removed from school systems as they are still important to developing essential reading and comprehension skills. It only strongly urges and asks for new perspectives to be presented as opportunities in the curriculum. I urge you to vote favorably for this bill for the future leaders of tomorrow, for students.
Okay, Jack, why don't you end it down? Okay, you've got 2 minutes and you are the final witness.
Dear members of the Education, Energy, and Environmental Committee, my name is Arpika Sherwani and I'm the Director of Partnerships of the Maryland Student Coalition and currently a high school junior in Howard County. I moved to the United States 10 years ago and ever since then I have attended several public schools across Maryland. In each school, I was asked questions like, why don't you celebrate Easter or Christmas like us? Or why is your name so weird? To my 8-year-old self, those questions made me feel uncomfortable, isolated, and hesitant, even though school is supposed to be a safe space, but it hasn't been for immigrant students like me across Maryland. I believe that the implementation of Senate Bill 189 is imperative because it would allow students in Maryland to receive education in other cultures and ideologies. Receiving this education will inspire students to become more open-minded and will encourage them to avoid demonstrating ignorance towards their peers who may come from different backgrounds from them. Senate Bill 189 will act as an open window for students in Maryland schools. Teachers will be encouraged to integrate literature from multicultural authors, which will create a feeling of inclusion for those who come from other ethnic backgrounds. In schools, we regularly read books like To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper E. Lee, and which explore racial injustice. However, I believe teachers can also incorporate books such as All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which are written from the pen of POC authors, inherently making students feel more connected to the literature they are reading. I strongly encourage you to implement the Senate Bill 189 in schools across Maryland. Students need to be exposed to diverse literature in order to prepare them for the real world. Students will meet hundreds of people from different backgrounds and ideologies from them. If they are not educated and exposed to this in school, it can create a disregard and lack of awareness towards students who come from backgrounds that are considered to be different in our current society. Thank you for your time and consideration implementing Senate Bill 189.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Senator Ellis or his sponsor panel? Okay, Senator Washington.
First of all, thank you so much. Octavia Butler is my favorite. And the notion of fictive, science fiction, fictive history, speculative history, really exciting. Also, just a comment, I look forward to you being leaders. You are leaders now, and perhaps being members of your local school boards and things. So I do have a question for each of you. Have you approached your local school boards about this issues? And if you could tell us about these interactions, because often that'll be the question we ask. And if you've met with not a receptive, then you escalate it to the next level. But I would be interested in if there's been an opportunity to
So
example?
I think maybe I can speak for all three of us. We are actually all students from Howard County, Maryland. And fortunately enough, our school system and our English language arts department allows us to have these opportunities to read these books. But I know in certain counties like Carroll County, they don't have the same opportunity to read these books. And we think that our experiences reading these books have truly made an impact on how we communicate with others, how we see others, and how we hold ourselves in society. And I think that my experience reading this in my past AP language class last year, it was an experience that I never had before. Even though we had the opportunity to read that book, that was my first time reading a book by an African-American author. And that's kind of disappointing in a sense, because I was in 11th grade. It took me up until my 11th grade in the public school system to read a book by an African-American female author. So I think that really just, it gives students a perspective, and it gives them a way to connect with others that they don't have opportunity to unless they have the formal teaching of a novel from a perspective other than their own.
And I understand you don't know what you're missing until you, you know what you're missing. So taking advantage of this and knowing what was missing from yours and wanting it for others. The bill also is looking to have, this might be for the sponsor, but feel free as well. You want to you want to develop content standards.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about, so that is for the state board to develop standards, and so that's different than requiring that they teach these things. Can you tell me?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're reviewing the actual content of the bill.
Yeah, sure, Senator. Thank you for that question. So the state board will require the local boards to develop these actual curriculum. So we are not imposing our will here with content in the Senate or Maryland General Assembly. And we're not telling the state board to just one size fits all for each county, but for each county, local board to develop those standards based on their school and population base.
Okay, so I'm reading it and it says the standards are developed by the state board. And then the counties use those standards to develop curriculum guides. Right? Is that
correct?
So guides, okay. And then each public school, so in 2 years, in the state shall include inclusive and diverse English language arts. So that's the progression that you're imagining.
It's similar to in other areas where we pass a law and it goes to the particular agency and they write the regulations to translate those laws into actual forms and actual detail rules.
Okay, great, thank you. And were you the panel? Were you a part of drafting the bill, or is there some parts of it that you think are especially important or more important, or
yes,
you can
we
live
did,
without? Or what's there?
We were a part of drafting the bill brief that we then sent to Senator Ellis. And from a personal standpoint, I think that overall, just encouraging the overall premise of the bill, encouraging counties to have more diverse curriculums is the most important part for me, like the entirety of the bill. I think that it allows students to, as you said, they don't know what they're missing out on yet until they experience it. And once they have that experience, just knowing that students will be able to be encountered by different novels and perspectives and viewpoints is what really drives me to go through with this bill.
And do you feel, this is a final question, do you feel that the state board providing guidance about, because not everyone knows how to handle this material. I mean, this is one of the challenges, right? So if they haven't had the experience, so do you think the state board providing guidance and policies around if one was going to engage in this type of inclusive English arts, what it should look like. Would that be something that you think would be helpful?
I think it would be helpful. I think that teachers that know the book really well and know how to teach the book really well and the content surrounding the book have the biggest imprints on their students. The ones that are able to handle discussions about race, about sexuality, about different parts of life that aren't touched on in any other class or in any other subject other than like the language arts departments in schools, really does help students understand the world outside of their own.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just add, Mr. Chair? Okay. In 1983, I was commissioned in the Air Force as an Air Force officer. And I remember my first officer evaluation report, there's a block on it. And the Air Force, back in '83, measured all the officers by DEA standards. There's a block that says the ability of this officer to get along with others from different parts of the country, different backgrounds. I mean, back in '83 in the Air Force, that was measured and still being measured. You know, our children, as they grow up into adulthood, go into the world, whether it's the military or corporate America, they must be able to get along with the people they're working with, no matter what the race or religion, sexual orientation. It's a requirement for them to succeed. And so what this bill's aim to do is to assist them in being successful as adults. And I really want to thank the student members for these many years working, trying to get this bill passed. And it's essential more now than ever for us to help them achieve their goals. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? We do actually have two virtual witnesses. Any questions for the live witnesses here in front of us? Okay, seeing none. We do have, again, two witnesses signed up virtually favorable. Jaden Ferris, I think will be first up. Is that, we have Mr. Ferris, and next up we've got Elena Bui, which will be next. So Mr. Ferris, you've got 2 minutes, and why don't you proceed?
Thank you. For honorable committee members, good afternoon. For the record, my name
Maybe
is...
just talk a little bit louder.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Okay.
Is this good?
Yeah, that's better. Come
Okay,
on.
thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jaden Ferris, a class of 2023 public school graduate in Maryland and a representative of GLSEN Maryland, a chapter of GLSEN National, the leading organization centered on sustaining inclusive K-12 education for LGBTQ+ students. We at GLSEN Maryland enthusiastically support Senate Bill 189, which would ensure the integration of inclusive and diverse narratives from all genders, races, ethnicities, and identities into Maryland's English language arts curriculum. Absent from most textbooks and assigned readings, the narratives of historically underrepresented and presently underrepresented groups remain almost invisible within current curriculum, painting an inaccurate and incomplete picture of the world. This reality underscores the urgency for this legislation, which confirms a commitment to ensuring a diverse curriculum that reflects the rich tapestry of our society. The benefits of inclusive curriculum extend far beyond mere visibility, as the experiences of all students are greatly impacted by the inclusion of inclusive curriculum. Research by our parent organization, GLSEN National, confirms this. Students at schools with inclusive curriculum reported hearing fewer slurs, lower levels of victimization, felt a higher sense of belonging, missed fewer days of school, and had a higher GPA in comparison to students whose schools did not have inclusive curriculum. As children's literature researcher Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop eloquently put it, books act as mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. This legislation opens the door for all students to do just that, peek into diverse realities, step into narratives beyond their own, and find themselves reflected within. Especially for LGBTQ+ students, their stories transcend exploration. They become mirrors reflecting identities long relegated to the shadows. For these reasons, we respectfully request a favorable committee report on Senate Bill 189. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ferris? Okay, seeing none, thank you, sir. Which will bring us to our final witness, Eleni Bui. Ms. Bui, you've got 2 minutes. We can see you, and why don't you proceed?
Good afternoon, members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. My name is Eleni Bui, and I am the Deputy Director of the Maryland Student Coalition and somebody who was involved in drafting this bill's language. I speak in favor of SB 189. I have been in the Montgomery County public school system since kindergarten. That is 12 years of learning, 12 years of literature, and 12 years of going underrepresented and disrespected in the public school system. The books we read in English class shape our perspectives and interests outside of the classroom. When we only read from one perspective, we limit our knowledge and curiosity. Unknowingly, the books I surrounded myself with as a child were about Caucasian, straight characters whose lives were nothing like the ones around me. People who struggled to make ends meet, dealing with loss and oppression. This is not just a matter of race, but a matter of culture. Education and literature have been tools for centuries to spread knowledge and awareness. An Asian author will write differently than a white author because they grew up in a different culture and therefore in a different world. If these cultural experiences are only taught from a white-centric view, minorities will feel ostracized. The bill aims to represent all minority authors of different religions, social classes, genders, sexual orientations, and the disabled community. This bill does not plan to completely replace the staple literature in English classes. It only asks that minority writers be given a chance to showcase their talent and spread their stories. Since I was a child, I'd spend hours at the library every weekend, lugging a bag full of books back home. I'd then spend hours transporting myself into various worlds. But counties like Carroll County are stripping this integral experience away from their children by banning over 60 books from their libraries, a majority written by women or discussing the LGBTQ community. Our generation is the leaders of tomorrow, and it is detrimental to build a generation of ignorance. For the reasons stated above, I urge the committee to issue a favorable report on SB 189. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 189, which brings us next to Senate Bill 122, Senator Augustine. And Senator Augustine, most of the testimony here is submitted as written.
Yep.
And so you're the only in-person witness.
Yeah, it's gonna be brief. All right. Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee, Senator Malcolm Augustine here on behalf of Senate Bill 122, Education Provision of Maryland Youth Crisis Hotline Telephone Number Alteration. Colleagues, it's a very, very simple bill. Years ago, the legislature saw fit to make sure that in the handbook for our youngsters, middle school and up, that there was a suicide prevention number that was in there. It was a youth suicide prevention number that was there, and that if there were a ID card, that number would be put onto the ID card. That number was an 800 number that really at this point is obsolete. We have now moved to 988 being the location where is the entryway for all things behavioral health crises. And so very simply, what this bill does is it just changes in statute to say that it should instead be 988 instead of the old number that has been made obsolete. The benefits of 988 are also that it's text as well. So a lot of folks are utilizing it for text, which you couldn't get with the 800 number that was there before. I would say that if you look through the testimony, you'll see there's strong support from behavioral health stakeholders and educators, and no objections to this. So it's pretty straightforward. And there's also no additional cost to the school systems because this will be implemented not for those that are existing, but for the handbooks and the cards that would be produced in the future, so going forward. I urge the committee to provide a favorable report on Senate Bill 122. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. most importantly, Senator Augustine, thank you for your ongoing leadership on this critical issue. You've been there from before the beginning, and this is an administrative update and clarification, and it's totally needed, and thank you. I just want to put out there, because hopefully there are 4 or 5 people who are watching. Not enough people know about 988, and you and the Democrat, and everybody, all of the people, we need to be talking about 988 more often. And just a quick anecdote that I don't know that I shared, but I was speaking at a high school in my district, and there were several classes. They put it in the auditorium, and as I was talking about, I was talking about 911, and I paused. I said, how many of you know about 988? And I asked them to raise their hand, and literally, let's say 100, 120 people in the auditorium. And there was one teacher who tentatively maybe I kind of know what it is, and did kind of a this thing. Not one student had heard of it. So we've got to get it out there. And so this bill, this ID card, all of the places is just an important, small, easy, affordable way of helping spread the word. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for Senator Augustine? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 122. Next up, Senator Gallion, Senate Bill 170. And we do have, you've designated John Wollums from MABE as the Maryland Association of Boards of Education as your sponsor panelist, and then we do have one other witness unfavorable, but we're going to start with you, Senator Gallion, and we'll take it from there, and then we'll go to Mr. Wollums after that.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and fellow committee members. For the record, Senator Jason Gallion, representing District 35, Cecil and Hartford counties, to introduce Senate Bill 170, County Boards of Education, Hearing Notices and Bid Advertisements, Electronic Posting. This legislation seeks to modernize how local boards of education fulfill certain public notice requirements. The bill provides small but meaningful changes that will save money and enable school districts to reach the public more effectively. First, the bill updates a specific public hearing notice requirement. Maryland public schools are required to hold a public hearing for a new school site under certain circumstances. Currently, if a hearing is to be held, it must be advertised in a newspaper of general circulation in the county. This bill would give the school board the option to advertise the hearing on their website instead. Second, the bill updates requirements for advertising a public school system small procurement. Current state law provides 3 options for advertisement. 1 is a newspaper, 2, Maryland Contract Weekly, or 3, both electronic and physical posting on a bid board. The latter 2 options are extremely outdated. Maryland Contract Weekly ceased publication in 2006. The eMaryland Marketplace is the state of Maryland's current online procurement system for all solicitations for state, county, schools, and universities. Similarly, physical bid boards are an outdated option as well. This bill allows school boards to use modern methods of advertising procurements. Providing for online posting of this information can save county boards of education money as they grapple with tight budgets. The newspaper advertising requirement dates back to the 1970s and is not a particularly effective means of providing information here in the 21st century. There is a minor amendment that has been submitted to the committee that will conform the bill to the House cross-file. The amendment makes reference to state finance and procurement Article 17-502 and also raises the bid threshold from $25,000 to $100,000. The change in threshold is not substantive, as $100,000 is current practice. This bill will allow our local boards of ed to operate more efficiently, promptly, at lower cost, and with broader reach. Thank you for your time, and I respectfully ask for a favorable committee vote.
Okay, why don't we go to Mr. Wollums, and then we'll take questions.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Wollums, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. I would like to start by thanking Senator Gallion for introducing this legislation and indicated by the cross-file it as bipartisan support. Always worth noting. Yes, section 5-112 of the education article can fall out of date, and Mabe and myself might be responsible for that in part because we don't like to draw attention to that section because it provides significant discretion to local school systems in the area of procurement broadly and generally outside of the school construction and renovation context, where we are essentially under all of the state requirements related to state procurement through other provisions of law. But section 5-112 is in need of the improvements proposed by Senator Gallion's bill, Senate Bill 170. We do support the amendments to conform it to the House version. And for example, that $25,000 threshold amount was updated many years ago to 50,000, and then very recently to 100,000. But you wouldn't necessarily know it from reading that section of the education article without going to the state finance and procurement article, right? So these are a very reasonable amendments to the law. And beyond updating to modernize, there is the element of staff time and community engagement around some of these decisions, like school siting, where you want the public engagement process to match the times and be responsive to the community's needs to receive notice through online technology. So for those reasons, we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 170. Thank you.
Any question for the sponsor or our witness? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. We've got one witness signed up unfavorable. We've got Rebecca Snyder. Snyder, why don't you have a seat? And you were signed up unfavorable, and you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Feldman and members of the committee, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Snyder. I'm the executive director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. We sit here to quibble with the notice requirements. So we heard Mr. Willems talk about how important it is to thoroughly inform the community of school sightings, which are probably one of, well, maybe not the most incendiary pieces of school debate, but certainly right on up there. And what this bill does is actually pull back notice. So we think that more notice is better notice, and the school system certainly should be posting that on their website. However, what that does, if it's only on the website, and by putting "or" in there, it effectively fractures where notice is found. By putting "or" in, it puts the onus on that citizen who is interested in school siting to go and find it, rather than putting it in the newspaper of general circulation, which is also online. It is thoroughly modern, and I think the community would be better served by just replacing that "or" with an "and" in the bill. And I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a very quick question for Rebecca. I'm in the bill, and Senator Gallion made some valuable points, I thought, and I'm wondering if you've given any thought to the cut the baby in half thing, which is on page 2 of the bill, updating the Maryland Contract Weekly. If Senator Gallion said it doesn't exist anymore, and calling it the eMaryland Marketplace, I mean, is something like that?
Oh, candidly, I don't have any problem with that. Like,
Okay.
it's really, for me, it's about the notice.
Understood.
And
But the other parts, the updating and making it accurate, you're not fighting that battle.
not at all. And that is, Contract Weekly doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And that just brings the statute in line with practice. And although, since I'm sitting here, I should always say, look at the limits, the dollar amounts when you're looking at transparency. You don't want that to be too high. It is current practice to be at 100,000. So that's not an area I have an opinion on.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any additional questions of our witness? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 170, which brings us to our final bill for the day, Senator Hester. And you've got 2 live witnesses as part of your sponsor panel, and you've got 2 virtual, so we've got a total of 4. Why don't we bring up your 2 in-person, Alex Casper and Bridget O'Toole from your office? No, I'm sorry. We've got 1 in-person, Alex Casper, and virtually we've got Lynn Gerald, and we've got Sarah Christina Well, why don't you tell me who you've designated as your sponsor panelists, just so we're clear. I've got several here. Leslie, who's on the call here? Okay, back to you. You're the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got
Yes.
four on my panel.
Okay.
Dr. Sadri Melli will go first, followed
Okay.
by Alex Casper, followed by Dr. Gerald, followed by Leslie Alsop.
Okay, so we've got a couple live witnesses and we've got some virtual. I'm just trying to keep track of who's on the line and who can wait their turn. So why don't you lead off with Senate Bill 180, and then we'll take the live witnesses, then we'll go virtual to your panelists, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, members of the Education, Energy and Environment Committee, for your consideration of Senate Bill 180. Auto-injectable epinephrine and bronchodilator use, availability, training, and policies, which will expand the law that will allow nurses to administer EpiPens in schools to include bronchodilators or albuterol as well. So this bill has a history in this committee. An identical bill, HB 266, made progress to the House last session, where it was referred to the Energy, Education, and Environment Committee here in the Senate. However, as this committee will recall, in the House, it was amended significantly so that only students with a confirmed diagnosis or a doctor's order could receive the treatment via a bronchodilator, and school nurses were the only ones able to administer the medication. The bill was also amended to do this all via guidelines in accordance with the Maryland Department of Health. In practice, these new amendments were so restrictive as they only helped children with documented asthma. Moreover, while the amendments allow for ubiquitous use of EpiPens, these are not FDA approved to treat asthma. For these reasons, HB 266 last year with the amendments was not approved by this committee. So just to go back for context again, according to the Asthma and Allergy Network, 7.6% of Maryland children have been diagnosed with asthma. But 56% of these children have not submitted the necessary documents, including the doctor's order required, to get access to the life-saving rescue inhaler they need. Students without properly filed paperwork or medication who may be experiencing an asthma attack in school and have no options. The school must call 911 and wait for help. During this time, the child's condition may worsen, and in some cases, this can lead to death. In many cases, a school nurse may know exactly what they need, albuterol, yet not be able to access it. So to address this problem, this bill will do three things. First, it requires the county school boards and authorized public schools to establish a policy to obtain, administer, and train school nurses and other school personnel to administer the bronchodilators. Second, it requires nurses and school personnel to complete training to be authorized to administer the bronchodilators. And third, it requires the State Department of Education to develop training and identification of respiratory distress and anaphylaxis in students. So this bill will ensure that no student with asthma, diagnosed or undiagnosed, which is half the kids, will be without the life-saving measure they need should they experience respiratory distress. Today, all 50 states have policies which allow for stock EpiPens in school. Just as the availability of EpiPens has helped to ensure the safety of students who experience anaphylaxis in school, a bronchodilator can help to ensure the safety of those who experience respiratory distress in school. That is why the number of states with stock albuterol laws is growing every year, with 18 states currently: Arizona, Arkansas, California, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Nebraska, Ohio, Oklahoma, Utah, and Virginia currently allow for stock bronchodilators. These best practices laws have been reported as successful. This legislation will enable Maryland to join the growing list of states prioritizing the health and safety of their students in the classroom. Additionally, it will ensure that Maryland schools are given a preference in receiving allergy and asthma related grants for public schools, as legislated in Congressman Steny Hoyer's 2020 amendment to the Public Health Service Act. So we'll be able to use that federal money in these schools. The effects of asthma have a direct impact on students' attendance, obviously, and ability to learn in the classroom. And just as students already have access to EpiPens for anaphylaxis, they should also have access to bronchodilators for asthma. Access to inhalers and proper training can ensure that school personnel are well equipped to respond to respiratory distress and ensure all students can learn in a safe environment. For these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on SB 180.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
Me. Hi, I'm Dr. Christy Sadramelli. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist at Johns Hopkins, and I've treated thousands of children with asthma from all over Maryland, from all backgrounds and severity levels, and I spent my whole morning doing that. I chair the Pediatric Advocacy Committee for the American Thoracic Society, and I'm considered a national expert in this area. I've co-authored the most recent policy statement, and I've advised many other states on this issue as they create their own legislation. I ask you to reject any amendments that would restrict this law to students with a proven asthma diagnosis. Consider other laws you have passed. The Narcan legislation was written for children believed to be in good faith to be having an opioid overdose. For obvious reasons, students do not need to prove they have opioid dependence to receive the Narcan. And under the EpiPen legislation, schools may administer an EpiPen to a student believed to be having anaphylaxis, as they should. Students do not have to prove they have a food allergy to receive it. These laws are successes, and this law should not require an asthma diagnosis for a child to receive emergency asthma medication. Albuterol is the gold standard for quick relief of asthma symptoms. EpiPen is the gold standard for quick relief of anaphylaxis, but it would be irresponsible and unscientific to treat children suffering from asthma attacks with EpiPens as the first line. They are not FDA approved for asthma, and no asthma treatment guideline recommends their use. It's true that the active ingredient in EpiPens was once a mainstay of asthma care 100 years ago, before albuterol was even invented. Science has advanced. In 2024, we use albuterol to treat asthma. You should not structure this law based on a 1920s era medical approach that non-experts have recommended. Anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. They're not an asthma expert, and my colleagues and I disagree, and I've discussed this with colleagues all over the country. I want to address the use of Epi in an emergency situation for asthma. On rare occasions, when a patient presents with asthma symptoms, is gravely ill in the hospital or by EMS, has not responded to other treatments, including albuterol, we do give, sorry, can I finish this sentence? A cocktail of drugs, which can include epinephrine. In this case, it is a last line of therapy and it's less effective. Albuterol is still the preferred first line treatment for asthma in a hospital setting or any setting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tell us who you are.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Casper, and I'm the Director of Advocacy for the American Lung Association. We are pleased to support Senate Bill 180 and thank Senator Hester for advocacy to keep Maryland kids safe. You have my written testimony, so I'll keep my comments brief. I do represent the Lung Association. Our primary mission is to help patients living with lung disease. Asthma is just that. Today, we're here talking about having asthma medications available in schools for kids who are in respiratory stress in an emergency. This is no different than what the current statute states for EpiPen or Narcan. I want to note, as you will hear from my clinical colleagues today, that rescue asthma medications, namely albuterol, is a safe medication and the clinical gold standard for asthma care, not epinephrine, as some may suggest. My colleagues are specialists who deal with pediatric asthma patients and their families day in and day out. They educate families, caregivers every day on the signs and symptoms of asthma. They understand what the standard of care and treatment and management of asthma better than anyone you might hear from. And they wouldn't be here to support this bill if we were proposing something that wasn't the standard of care. The policy, as Senator Hester mentioned, has passed in 18 states, including our neighbor, Virginia. You will also hear from a colleague today in Texas who recently changed their legislation because it was so restrictive and it wasn't helping enough children. You may hear today that it's hard to tell the difference between allergic reaction and asthma flare. I will defer to my clinical colleagues, but I have a child who has both food allergy and asthma, and I can tell the difference, and so can he. I leave you with this thought. This bill is about equity. It's about ensuring that children who need this medication in an emergency can access it, regardless if they have the right paperwork in place. I ask you to support this bill and protect the children of Maryland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we open up for some questions from our live witnesses, then we'll go to our virtual witnesses. So any questions for Senator Hester or her two panelists? Senator Washington.
Thank you. Are there any negative effect, or are there any physical effects if someone who is not asthmatic gets this shot? Like, is there something, it's like, oops, this was something, it was a food allergy and not, I don't know. Like,
Okay,
some of the
let me
consequences.
answer that.
Thanks.
So starting with medication side effects, albuterol. It's one of the safest medications we give. So in terms of serious side effects, no, there's almost no risk of that. So for example, a student is very short of breath after gym. That could be asthma, that could be not asthma. Someone's anxious, it could be that. In these situations, if they're not having asthma, it's very benign. You do allude to if someone has a food allergy. So the schools are currently very well trained to recognize food allergy, and that is not going to change. This does not change at all. And if someone is obviously having signs of a food allergy, they should receive epi. And in the rare case that it's really not clear what's going on, then they should receive both, but only then, not if the school is like, this seems like a pure respiratory issue. Those students should not receive epi. We're focusing on this because it's been, I don't know what others will say today, but in past years, it's been brought up a lot. And so I try to position myself as the expert on this respectfully.
Yeah, and also I'm just raising questions
Yeah.
that I've heard before.
Yes.
And again, I'm not a physician, so I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm using the correct terminology. I'm assuming there's no contraindication or conflict if both of these are administered in short succession or, you know, fluid
Correct.
testing.
Correct. Although it would only be appropriate to give the EpiPen if they think the student is having anaphylaxis, not if they think the student is having asthma. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so.
But giving
how
them
do
at the
they
same
know?
time can be safe at that situation.
So I guess we're balancing saving a life, you know, what's the price of doing nothing? And clearly that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
But then we also have to balance what if you do something that's not correct? So what's the
Yeah.
cost? So,
Yeah.
you know, so if it's someone gets an epi when they
Mhm.
shouldn't, or they get the
Yeah.
Narcan and sorry, but they get this and they shouldn't, what actually happens?
Yeah. So
Physically.
first, I will remind that you could die from untreated asthma or untreated food allergy. And if
That's
someone
what we don't want to
is
happen,
having
so.
asthma in school and they only receive an EpiPen, for example, that is a less strong, less effective treatment for asthma. So I'll start there. And then to answer your other question, what's the harm in giving both? Is that a good way to say it? Or I
Well,
just want to make sure I follow.
given that the people who would be administering it
Yeah.
are not that maybe they don't understand the nuances and differences to the
Yeah.
degree that you do, or
Yeah.
any who's a, you know, a specialist in pediatric. I just think we just should understand what could happen to a child, and then we can make the determination, well,
Sure.
that's better than dying, or
Oh.
that's something that, you know, I just don't know. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So if you administer one or both of these to
Mhm.
someone who is not experiencing the ailment for which the drugs are designed to treat,
Yeah.
what happens?
So they're both very safe medications. So neither medicine should lead to a severe bad outcome if the diagnosis is incorrect, if they're both given, for example. But I think what's often happening in the schools, and you'll hear from some current and former school nurses today, but they often know exactly what they need to give. It's usually a nurse, you know, it is sometimes another staff because there has to be a backup system. They typically do know what they want to give. And the question is currently, they have one tool. They have epi for food allergy. They don't have a tool for asthma. And anyone who says they use epi for asthma in schools, not typically. And if they are, it's not how our law is written. It's not how the policies are done. And it's a less effective treatment. So I guess the question is, there are these unknown things that can happen at the fringes. And in those situations, if the school staff or nurse truly thinks, I'm not sure, then they should receive both. But those situations are more rare than you know what I mean? This mostly it's a school nurse who knows what she needs and currently doesn't have the tool that they need for asthma. Yeah.
Question or statement. Currently, a nurse or anyone who knows that they want to administer epinephrine, auto-injectable epinephrine or bronchial dilators. They are not able to do that unless the child has a diagnosis. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Oh.
So we currently have, this is just an amendment to the current EpiPen legislation. The EpiPen legislation works well. So as a reminder, they've had this, it's not changing. So for, I don't know how many years, but more than 4 years, because that's when I started with the asthma side, we've had the EpiPen legislation. So that's not going away for food allergy. Currently, there's not something for asthma. It's nothing. No.
So school staff, healthcare providers are not authorized to administer the suggested medication for
Right.
asthma.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Thanks.
Okay, any additional questions for our live witnesses? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to virtual witnesses. We do have a designated Lynn Gerald, who I see on screen is one of your sponsor panelists designated. So Ms. Gerald, we're going to start with you. And then we'll go through some other witnesses in there. We also have some favorable with amendments signed up as well, witnesses. So Ms. Gerald, we'll start with you and you've got 2 minutes, okay?
Thank you. I'm Dr. Lynn Gerald, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Population Health and Professor of Medicine at the University of Illinois, Chicago. I'm the national expert in stock albuterol policy guidelines and implementation. And in my 30-year career, I've had maintained consistent funding from the National Institutes of Health to study school-based asthma interventions such as stock inhalers. I was a senior author of the National Stock Albuterol Policy Guidelines, and I have advised groups from 10 states on their legislation. The reason I've been so actively involved in the passage of stock inhaler laws and implementation of such programs is that this has been the most impactful intervention for children with asthma that I've seen in my 30-year career. I'm here to provide strong support for this bill and to encourage you to follow the national guidelines. My research indicates that stock inhaler programs can reduce 911 calls for respiratory distress by 20% and EMS transports by 40%. Furthermore, my research in Arizona, Illinois, and Missouri has indicated that about 80% of the children who receive stock albuterol are able to return to class. I urge you to follow the national guidelines in crafting your legislation. These guidelines were created and approved by the American Thoracic Society, the National Association of School Nurses, the American Lung Association, and the Allergy and Asthma Network. Some groups in Maryland have created a lot of fear around this bill and are advocating for an EpiPen as first line of treatment for asthma. This is not best medical practice and is not in line with national guidelines. The National Guidelines Committee briefly discussed the role of Epi for use in respiratory distress at school and were unanimous in determining it should not be recommended. Furthermore, Maryland is the only state where this issue has been raised. School staff across the country are distinguishing between the symptoms of these two conditions and using the correct medication. In conclusion, what the national guidelines do recommend is that legislation include the following: that medication can be administered to any child in respiratory distress. Many children experience their first exacerbation at school, so may not have a diagnosis of asthma, and this would cause a delay in treatment. There are also few causes of respiratory distress. May I finish my thought? There are also a few causes of respiratory distress that would not respond to albuterol or would be harmed by albuterol. It's an incredibly safe medication. Currently, 18 states have stock inhaler legislation, and we've had no major issues with medication administration in any stock albuterol program. Legislation should also ensure immunity from civil liability for staff and prescribers, and any trained school staff, not just nurses, should be allowed to administer stock albuterol. I urge you to support Senate Bill 180, and thank you for the opportunity to present my testimony.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Gerald? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to go back. I missed at least one straight favorable in person here from Maryland Department of Health. Is Jason Kaplan here? Okay, I don't see Mr. Kaplan. Okay, so back to the virtual witnesses.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is Mr. Kaplan? Are you here, Maryland MDH?
My apology. This is, yes, I'm with MDH. Can you?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh,
Come,
my apologies.
come up here.
I'm from MDH. We had,
Wait this way because we're streaming, so in case you're not at the mic, nobody's going to hear you out there.
My apologies. We had the letter of support with amendments and we'll be speaking on that.
Okay. Well, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
It was signed up differently. It was signed up in person, straight favorable. Okay, so that's fine. We'll get back to you then. Okay, let's go back to the virtual witnesses who are straight straight up favorable. I see Ann Goldsboro, I see you there on the screen and you've signed up straight favorable. So we're going to go. What is it?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, actually, we have one more sponsor panelist, Leslie Alsop, who is on there. I don't actually. Okay, oh, that's right. You just have LA. Okay. Ms. Alsop, you're on the sponsor panel and you're virtual and you've got 2 minutes and you're straight up favorable. Let's go to you next and then we'll go to you, Ms. Goldsboro, after that. Okay?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Leslie Alsop. My expertise is in public health, and I thank the committee for the opportunity to express my support. I'm an assistant professor in Texas, and I've had a leadership role in implementing school programs there, including stock albuterol, and in the recent efforts to align Texas policy with best practice. The model we use for stock albuterol is termed Asthma 411, first developed with CDC support 20 years ago. And across these 2 decades, we've seen stock albuterol both improve safety for students who experience symptoms at school and also serve as a catalyst to identify students who may have poor asthma control and connect them with the services they need. This has been especially beneficial for students who are at risk at the intersection of health and education. For the past 10 years, I've worked to scale this program from a 2-year 2-school pilot to expansion to 350 campuses with over 250,000 students and current work to disseminate statewide. Our safety and efficacy outcomes align with and directly support the data that has already been presented by Dr. Lynn Gerald. I won't repeat that. Only to emphasize, there has not been a reported adverse outcome, to my knowledge, either in the original 6 years of the program or in the 10 years that we have been implementing stock albuterol in Texas. We conduct an annual survey with nurses and school health staff, and their responses have been overwhelmingly positive, many saying it's the best thing that they have encountered to better serve children in their years as a school nurse. In 2019, Texas legislation passed with good intent, but was accompanied by barriers such as those being considered. Can I just finish this sentence?
You could finish.
Yes. I thank ALA and Texas nurses for strong support in addressing these problems in 2023, but it took us 4 years to correct these problems. It's too long for students to wait for best practices. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Also? Okay, seeing none, we're going to next go to Ms. Goldsboro, Ann Goldsboro, who signed up straight favorable. 2 minutes.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak today in support of Senate Bill 180. My name is Ann Goldsboro. I'm a registered nurse with the Pediatric Pulmonology Division at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and I have many years of experience taking care of school-age asthma patients. I'm also the parent of school-age children with asthma and food allergies. The views I express are my own. Senate Bill 180 makes good sense. It should be passed. Other states have taken similar measures. At this point, there are 18 states who already have stock bronchodilators, these asthma rescue medications. They are kept on hand in case of breathing emergencies like asthma attacks. Bronchodilators like albuterol are safe, they're effective, the risks of using these medications are low. They don't mask any other kinds of symptoms. Bronchodilators like albuterol provide quick, life-saving relief for breathing problems. And they're easy to learn how to use and administer to treat asthma attacks. I worked in asthma clinic this morning and taught this to families with multiple levels of education and familiarity with this just this morning. You need to understand that breathing problems affect many children. These rates for asthma are higher for our minority children. They're higher for low-income children. This will help them even more than others. Asthma attacks can be life-threatening, and quick access to an albuterol inhaler with a spacer can and does save lives. Starting treatment right away can turn an asthma attack around. These these parents, you won't have the costly emergency department visit. The children can go back to the classroom. The parent won't miss a day of work because they urgently need to come take care of a child. I urge you to support Senate Bill 180. I'm confident that keeping stock albuterol on hand in schools is good public policy, and it would benefit the children of Maryland.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Goldsboro? Okay, seeing none, we're going to next go to Elaine Papp. Ms. Papp, you're next up, signed up straight favorable, and you've got 2 minutes. And unmute yourself. You unmute her?
Okay.
You're good.
My name is Elaine Papp, and I'm a registered nurse with a master's degree. I'm retired from my full-time job. I worked as part-time as a contract school nurse in Baltimore City. I'm here before you today to share my story and to advocate for the passage of Senate Bill 180. In 2018, I saved a student's life, but I lost my job. It was a really harrowing experience. The student did not have doctor's orders or an inhaler in the health unit, so I was completely unaware of her situation. Her inhaler was locked in the gym teacher's desk, and he was out of the building. His office was also locked. Paramedics were called, but were very delayed in responding. While the principal and the teachers frantically tried to find the key to the office, the student lost consciousness, was gasping for air at a rate of 70 breaths per minute and a pulse rate of 124. I knew that after loss of consciousness, she had approximately 15 minutes to live if untreated. And I was watching the student die. Not knowing when the paramedics would arrive, I gave the unconscious student another's asthma rescue inhaler by holding the inhaler into her open mouth and pressing the cartridge so that the puffs went into her lungs. She was gasping so hard that it pulled the medication into her lungs and reached the bronchospasm and released it. An unorthodox way to administer the medication, but very effective. And within a few minutes, she began breathing normally and returned to consciousness. I lost my job because I made a decision to break the rules to save a life. This should not be the decision anyone should have to make. The rules never give a student another's medication and never give a medication if you don't have a doctor's order in the health file. As a registered nurse, I had access to the Maryland asthma guidelines. I had Narcan, I had EpiPen, but since EpiPen is not FDA approved to treat asthma, I didn't have an emergency medication for asthma. So I urge you to vote favorably through the process on this bill. And I do have a little inhaler here if you want to see how I administered the asthma medication to someone who was unconscious. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the witness, Ms. Papp?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then we've got Lily Mendelson. You're our final virtual witness, and then we're going to go back to some favorable with amendment live witnesses. So Ms. Mendelson, you get 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of Senate Bill 180. My name is Lily Mendelson. I'm a citizen of Maryland, a person with asthma, and a school nurse working in a Baltimore City elementary middle school with approximately 1,400 students. I worked as a pediatric nurse for 4 years at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where I cared for children suffering from acute asthma exacerbation so severe they were admitted to the hospital. In 2018, I left the hospital to work as a school nurse, caring for some of the same children, but in a community setting. This school year, over 300 of our approximately 1,400 total students have a reported asthma diagnosis. That's a rate of about 25%, much higher than the national and state averages. Despite my best efforts, as of today, the 17th of January, our health office has updated paperwork, which is needed for me to legally give medicine for only 83 of those over 300 students with asthma. That's less than a third. This means I can administer albuterol legally, the first line medicine for an asthma attack, to only about 1/3 of the students with known asthma in my school. Current policy leaves the other 2/3 of the students with asthma without access to a potentially life-saving medication, along with any other students with unreported or yet undiagnosed asthma. Almost daily, students come to my health suite reporting difficulty breathing, but without the appropriate paperwork for albuterol. Interventions are extremely limited for me at this point. Fortunately, my school has a school-based health center, so in an urgent or emergent situation, we do have a provider on site who can prescribe and administer the albuterol with consent of a student's family. If the albuterol does not resolve a breathing issue, it provides some immediate relief, which we follow up with additional medications and sometimes a trip to the emergency room. Unfortunately, oh gosh, I just saw the time. This is atypical. Most schools don't even have a full-time nurse, let alone a provider. The sight and sound of a child struggling to breathe is not something I can easily get out of my mind. More than once, I've assessed a student and determined they're having an acute asthma attack, but haven't been able. Can I finish this? I'm sorry.
You can.
Thank you. I've assessed the student, determined that they're having an acute asthma attack, but I have not been able to reach a family member to get consent for treatment. I have to sit next to the child, try my best to comfort them, provide non-pharmacological interventions, and weigh the risks and benefits of activating EMS services versus waiting for a family member to call me back. This struggle continues until either the student's condition worsens and I have to call 911, or hopefully their asthma attack resolves without medication. Access to stock albuterol would provide me with a way to safely, appropriately, and legally help students in my care who are experiencing severe difficulty breathing. I already have access to other emergency meds.
Ms. Mendelson,
Narcan.
if you could bring to closure.
Yep, this is my last sentence. Thank you.
Okay.
I already have access to other emergency meds, Narcan for overdose and Epi for anaphylaxis. It follows that I should be able to give albuterol for an urgent breathing situation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none. Okay, we're now going to go, that's the extent of our virtual straight favorables. We're going to now go, we have 4 witnesses. These were the final witnesses for the day. 4 witnesses signed up favorable with amendments. We've got Liz Elliott, Robin Elliott, Anilesh Kalyanarama, and Lauren Lamb. Those are the 4 witnesses signed up favorable with amendments. We're missing at least one of those 4. Not sure which one, but okay. Why don't Robin? I know your face, so why don't we start with you, and we'll figure out who we're missing, and everybody gets 2 minutes. Okay, favorable with amendments.
Great, thank you. Robin Elliott, I'm here today on behalf of the Maryland Nurses Association. You are missing Lauren Lamb, who is from the Maryland State Education Association. She had to leave just a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
I have been here before discussing this bill, and we are very much in support of stock albuterol programs. We support the bill that the House passed last year. We know that there are new stakeholders at the table sitting next to me, and we'd be happy to work with anyone to see if the House version should be changed at all. But at the core, what you'll hear from the school health nurses are concerns about not about the side effects, because there are no side effects really or contraindications of stock albuterol. It's the issue of whether or not we're going to accidentally miss children who are at risk for anaphylactic shock. So happy to work with you all. We've worked with many challenging issues. I remember being in front of you for medical cannabis. So I feel like if we could work through medical cannabis in schools, we can work through this. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Elliott, president of the Maryland Association of School Health Nurses. I live and work in Montgomery County, and I've worked in school health since 2009, where school nurses are responsible for more than one school building. I'm opposed to Senate Bill 180 as it is written. Stock bronchodilators are immensely important for children, and while the bill's intent is to safeguard the health of students, it really raises the risk of deterring life-saving epinephrine, which is appropriate medical care for a student with anaphylaxis. Symptoms can sometimes be the same. We all know that in Maryland, stock epinephrine is already in health rooms. And every year, school nurses train unlicensed staff in the specific protocol to identify potential anaphylaxis, administer epi, and call 911 and send the student to the emergency room. This bill would allow for non-medical laypersons to identify the difference between asthma and anaphylaxis. And this is a complex medical decision that is done by a healthcare provider. As a registered nurse, I cannot make this determination. And it's really not safe for Maryland's children, for laypersons to make this determination because of the chance of delaying the administration of life-saving epinephrine. In addition, while the bill's focus is on bronchodilators, it would rewrite the framework for the administration of epinephrine by adding a new requirement for school personnel to take a specific course in how to identify the difference between asthma and anaphylaxis. The school nurse would identify appropriate laypersons to take this course. And as a nurse, I have to be assured and confident that the layperson would be able to make the appropriate determination. I don't know of a single school nurse who'd be comfortable with that proposal. I urge the committee, just like Robin Elliott suggested, to consider amendments that were in the third reading of House Bill 266 last session. Thank you very much for your time.
I think you clarified in your final sentence, because you started off your testimony saying that you're here to oppose the bill.
As
You are
it's
signed
written.
up as favorable
Right.
with amendment. So
Correct.
you are okay if it's amended to the way it came to us last year.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
very much. And now we're going to close with Nilesh Kalayaranama. Am I close?
Pretty good. Yep, I'll take it.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan. I'm Nilesh Kalyanaraman, the Deputy Secretary for Public Health Services at the Maryland Department of Health and a primary care doctor as well. So the Maryland Department of Health supports this bill with amendments, and we support the use of stock bronchodilators in Maryland schools. In schools, it's not uncommon for children with asthma to experience barriers to having access to their own bronchodilators due to a number of factors that we're, I think, quite familiar with. But to address this gap, when we have a stock bronchodilator program, we need to have clear guidelines in place to make sure that it's safe for students, streamlined, and that there aren't undue burdens on staff. So, for children with an asthma diagnosis or with a history of prescription bronchodilators, having these stock bronchodilators critical, right? And we support that because it allows then the school health staff. We talk about nurses, but we have to recognize that it's a mix of staff across a variety of licensure levels can administer that because they have a reasonable expectation that those symptoms are related to a diagnosis of asthma. For children without a diagnosis of asthma, however, who are in respiratory distress, that starts getting into trying to figure out, is this asthma or is this something else? Is this anaphylaxis or is this another breathing issue? And we typically don't have nurses doing diagnostics. They're not allowed to diagnose. And I think that's the challenge that we have here is that we don't want to push diagnosis in an emergency. We have to recognize that emergencies are treated as emergencies, which means that yes, you use epinephrine because if you're wrong about an inhaler, it's going to delay care. That's the problem here, right? And so we support this with amendments to remove the requirements for training school personnel and designated volunteers to distinguish between asthma and anaphylaxis. That is hard. We'd like to authorize school nurses and other school health staff to use stock bronchodilator only when there's a diagnosis or prior prescription. And lastly, to require reporting and notification to parents only for the use of stock bronchodilators and not for any usage of a bronchodilator, because that would be just extremely onerous. So once again, we support this with amendments. Thank you for your time.
Okay, any questions? We've got Senator Brooks for our three panelists favorable with amendments, then Carosa, and then Senator Hester.
Okay, thanks, Chair. This would be for Ms. Liz. Yeah, if you were faced with the situation that Ms. Elaine Papp was faced with a child, that's, not breathing and and about to enter into, transitioning, what would have been your response there?
My response would be to reach for the stock EpiPen, because at least the protocol that I teach very often in Montgomery County includes the administration of stock epinephrine for severe respiratory distress, which is exactly what the student was experiencing. And so that would have been what I would have done. Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so that would have been effective here if it was an asthmatic situation?
I will sort of bring to the committee's attention that I did some research. The Asthma and Allergy Foundation indicates that sometimes it's difficult to tell if it's asthma or anaphylaxis. And if you're not sure, the best course of action is to give epinephrine. And so I was not there at that point in time. I would assume that a student who has significant respiratory distress was an anaphylaxis, and I would give the stock EpiPen because that would be immediately available to me right there. It's in every health room in the state of Maryland, and that's what I would have chosen to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to direct my question to Nurse Elliott, but then I realized there are two Nurse Elliots at the witness table, so I guess this is directed to Nurse Liz Elliott. Anyway, earlier in the hearing, we heard testimony that a parent could tell the difference between asthma and a food allergy. Would a teacher have that same ability to distinguish between the two?
Well, if the teacher had their own student in the class, absolutely. Parents know their kids really well. I have a child with asthma and anaphylaxis both. I can tell the difference because I live with Katie. But if you have a teacher who is responsible for, say, 25 or so students in a classroom, and they don't know those kids' individual health conditions, a teacher would be very hard pressed to tell the difference between asthma and anaphylaxis. Oftentimes, anaphylaxis as a severe allergic reaction is characterized by respiratory distress. That's one of the big cardinal symptoms that we pay a lot of attention to. And so probably not. And that's what scares me. I wouldn't want a student to be identified as, oh, this is asthma, and the student gets an inhaler, they're watched in the health room for a bit and sent back to the classroom, and then things go south, and the teacher has responsibility for 25 other students and is not a trained medical professional and wouldn't likely pick up on it soon enough. In the event of anaphylaxis, epinephrine is proven to be life-saving. The early administration of epinephrine makes a humongous impact and difference in terms of the student recovering and recovering quickly. And that's what I'm fearful of, is the delay in the administration of life-saving epinephrine.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Okay, and Senator Hester.
I have two questions, if you don't mind, Chair. The first one is, we heard in the earlier panel that epinephrine was not FDA approved for respiratory distress from asthma.
So that may be the case. However, it is effective in the case of respiratory distress. It is a very quick acting drug. It provides, 15 minutes or so of time that you can all of a sudden breathe again. I've seen it work in students with respiratory distress. There are many, many medications in this country that are given off-label. And the additional piece about epinephrine in the health room is you always call 911, always 100% of the time. And when the EMS unit arrives on the scene, they have the capacity to administer albuterol via nebulizer, which is actually more effective than via an inhaler, even with a spacer. And so for cases of anaphylaxis and the administration of epinephrine, our EMS partners know to send a paramedic who can give albuterol right away if that's indicated. There are very strict protocols that paramedics follow in the state of Maryland to help make that determination, and they immediately would consult with a hospital physician in the emergency room if there was any question.
You could get back to me with some data that shows that that, sorry, that epinephrine is a good solution for a child suffering from asthma and better than albuterol, that would be great. My second question is around the 18 other states. So what I've heard is that Maryland is the only state where the Nurses Association is really concerned about this. And it hasn't been an issue. And in fact, the United States Nurses Association supports this bill. So I'd like some data on what's going so wrong that you're worried about in the 18 states where we're doing this. Can you provide some evidence of what is not working?
Yeah, that's absolutely a fair question. I can tell you I have been in contact with the national organization, and their current stance is not clear. And I have talked to folks from the National Association from other states that this didn't move forward in terms of stock bronchodilators for students experiencing symptoms that might be asthma or may be perceived as asthma.
I think we're hearing, I'm not sure I agree with what you just said. We may be hearing different things. So why don't you get in writing the two questions I asked for? And we'll continue from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. The NASM position statement, I will absolutely research that.
So that's an action item for you guys to get back to us on that. I mean, they have a position one way or the other, or it's unclear or whatever, you know, that's something we should be able to obtain. Any additional questions for our panel here? Okay. Senator Washington.
This isn't a question. This is actually, I guess, a recognition and a thank you to our Deputy Secretary, who was in a previous life the Health Secretary for Anne Arundel County, and just want to thank you for keeping us all safe during the years of COVID. And that was just a tremendous, so much work. And I just wanted to recognize that 2020, 2021, just your constant focus on public health and the protection of us here, as well as the people that you represent. So thank you so much. And I just want to give you a hand for thanking you. That's it. Also, prior to redistricting, he was my constituent, but still.
Okay, now we know the real reason you wanted to give me a shout out.
Just one block over, but again, still, thank you so much and I'm really happy to have the health department weigh in on this. Appreciate it.
If I may, could I answer your question, Senator Hester, for a second? I think you asked a really spot on question: is why not for somebody who has asthma, epinephrine is not first line. I think you're exactly correct, right? For somebody who has asthma, for child adults, the right step is to, as long as they can use the inhaler with spacers, to use that. I think what we're talking about here, though, is what happens when you don't know, right? That's actually the core issue that we're really trying to figure out, is across the entire school health system, across all 24 counties, if you don't know that that child has asthma, then you're actually faced with the question is, am I diagnosing them with asthma correctly? Is it anaphylaxis or is it something else? That, I think, is the core tension here, right? And so for a child with asthma, that's why we support the stock bronchodilator for any child. You know that, you see them having an asthma attack. Yes.
18 other states where they provided the training for the health support staff. Has there been an instance where they've messed up? That is the question. Because we just heard from the woman in Texas, they got 250,000 kids who are now part, or 250,000 students who are now part of this program, and they haven't had an accident in 10 years. So in the meantime, you've got, 300 kids in that one Baltimore City school who are sitting there desperate. And I mean, I had asthma as a child. I also had anaphylactic shock. I know both, and they're both scary. And I would really like some evidence of the problem that people are having such a hard time, that we're having more kids die because of the mistakes that the trained health supports are making, than the fact that the EMS can't get there in time. Because I think that I would guess, if we could actually get the data, that it's not as big a problem as the Nurses Association of Maryland and only in Maryland seems to think.
Well, I'll check on that. I understand that at least 3 other states do have a restriction in terms of requiring a diagnosis of asthma. So it's not all 18 of them. There are some states, like I said. And to your point, we'll look at that. There have been a number of papers. We'll look at that as well. And we have looked through some of them, right? And we'll follow up on that.
Of course, we had this issue previously. I'm surprised that those papers haven't been reviewed since, did we have a year ago, huh? What's that? Okay. Well, anyway, we framed the issue, I think, pretty specifically. Any additional questions for the panel before we break for the day? Well, with that said, we put in our work for the people of Maryland today. I think covered a lot of subject areas, and that concludes Senate Bill 180, and that concludes our work for today. So enjoy the rest of your